Hey, it's the Latino Newsletter podcast. It's a show about us all the time. I am your host, Julio Ricardo Varela. A special thanks to the generous support from the Latino Community Foundation for Season 1 of this podcast. To learn more about the Latino Community Foundation, visit latinocf.org. All right, it's episode 6 this week. Episode 6. And if you're new to the podcast, the best thing you can do for us is go listen to the previous 5 episodes and share us. Please, we're new, we're small, we're mighty. Root for the underdog, y'all. Okay, episode 6. We're talking about Puerto Rico. The island colony is holding local elections the same day the United States has its elections in November, and it's going to get a bit intense down there. And before we start the show, did you see Bad Bunny jumping in this week about the Puerto Rico elections? Basically saying that the island's colonial parties have done nothing, nada, over the last 20 years. Let's take a listen to a clip from the podcast that Bad Bunny was on earlier in the week.
Es bueno denunciar las cosas en las redes sociales, es bueno salir a la calle a protestar, dejarse sentir como pueblo, pero yo creo que la protesta más grande es ir el 5 de noviembre a votar en contra de la gente que nos ha llevado a este despingue y crical. A la gente que se aprovecha de la influencia y del miedo a la gente y de las propagandas de gobierno nuevo que se pintan de como que necesitamos un cambio. Esa frase está bien quemada en las campañas políticas de las mismas cabronas caras.
You know, I've been covering Puerto Rico politics for 20 years now, so I understand what he's saying. And one thing I can conclude is that nobody is a fan of the current status quo, or Luma Energy, or the Fiscal Control Board, or what we're talking about today, which is Act 22, also known as Act 60, depending on, when it was passed, right? So let me read more about Act 22 from one of the several investor pages that promotes it to American investors. So the laws started in 2012 to, and I'm quoting, promote the exportation of services by companies and individuals providing such services from Puerto Rico and the relocation of high net worth individuals to Puerto Rico. Okay, I did that in my American investor voice. Puerto Rico. You don't say, you know what I'm saying? Say Puerto Rico, American investors go Puerto Rico. Anyway, seriously, you have the internet. Give Act 22 a look. We actually published a great op-ed from Suzanne Ramirez de Arellano earlier this summer at the Latino Newsletter about Act 22 and, according to her, why it should be abolished. And today's show is going to talk to not one guest, but 2 guests who are literally diametrically opposed politically on almost everything else in the universe, except for the abolition of Act 22. Okay? So let's meet each one of them, right? Full disclosure, they're both friends of mine because Puerto Ricans are like that, right? We're friends with everyone who's Puerto Rican, right? So our first guest is Federico de Jesús, co-director of the Losing Puerto Rico video campaign, showcasing why Congress must close the Act 22 loophole. Fede, as I call him, has more than 20 years of experience working in Washington, D.C. on Latino and Puerto Rico issues and is an advisor to several Puerto Rican diaspora groups advocating for self-determination and also to abolish Act 22. Fede, welcome to the Latino Newsletter.
Muchas gracias. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
My next guest is Javier Ortiz, or also known as Javi, and Javi is a cybersecurity expert. He's also an investor who believes that Puerto Rico ought to be decolonized by being annexed into the United States. Okay? So Javi supports statehood for Puerto Rico. And he believes this, that the foreign in a domestic sense tax structure of Puerto Rico is a major impediment in reaching what he says is true equality for Puerto Ricans. Javi, hello, sir. Welcome to the Latino Newsletter podcast.
You know, it is such a pleasure to be here with you, Julio, and congratulations with this new endeavor of yours.
All right. So let's just get this out of the way. The two of you are literally opposed politically on almost everything. Is that correct? Is that factually correct?
Yeah.
That is a fact. Absolutely.
But you're friends. So I'm just going to say Federico's like the Democrat and Javi's the Republican. But Fede, both of you agree about what needs to get done with Act 22. So, Federico, give me the quick summary of why Act 22 or Act 60 or Act 20, whatever, has been such a bad idea for Puerto Rico.
Sure. Let's take a step back. Puerto Rico, because Congress decided back in 1900 that Puerto Rico would be foreign for tax purposes.
Okay.
During the 20th century, Puerto Rico had these amazing tax incentives that created manufacturing, industrialized the island, took a lot of people out of poverty. But Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich got together in the 90s and decided to take that away.
Oh, yes.
And Puerto Rico got into this financial and debt crisis.
Exactly.
And as a result, the current candidate for governor, when she was Speaker of the House, and then Governor Luis Fortuño, was a good friend, they decided that they wanted to attract millionaires and billionaires to live on the island. And because Puerto Rico is exempt from federal income taxes, they decided, okay, well, let's get rid of all taxes on dividends and capital gains. And the only thing you have to do is live here half of the year, and you're good. You don't have to pay a cent to Uncle Sam. You don't have to pay almost anything to Puerto Rico. And they'll come here, the money will magically trickle down, and everything will be great. So fast forward 12 years later, and there's a bubble in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Everything's a lot more expensive, and people can't afford to live where they are.
Okay.
And people are laundering money, and this is just out of control. And that has not translated into prosperity for Puerto Rico, but instead more poverty and people just being priced out of their community. So that's why Congress needs to act, because Congress created the loophole.
Okay. So I appreciate you the summary. Very succinct. And that would be Jennifer Gonzalez, who is now running for governor of Puerto Rico. She's the resident commissioner, or as Javi says, the appointed diplomat of Puerto Rico.
Elected ambassador. I'm sorry.
Hold on a second. I don't say that. 48 USC 891 says that the resident commissioner elected by the people of Puerto Rico has to present a certificate of election to the United States Department of State in order to receive official recognition by all departments of the United States government.
Damn.
And
that's a deep cut.
And 48 USC 892 means that the House of Representatives is the executive agent that pays for things. So I'm not saying that. U.S. law says that, just like U.S. law says that Puerto Rico is foreign for tax purposes, which creates this problem, which is what Federico is talking about. And look, at the end of the day, for me,
this transition is awesome.
The idea of Puerto Rico being colonized needs to be solved. Congress solves that problem. And I think that Act 22, Act 60, this idea that people are not paying federal income taxes in Puerto Rico, be it because they just moved there or because they've always lived there, creates this issue that literally is holding Puerto Rico in this limbo, political limbo, that has been going on for 120-some years.
Let me just get this straight for the both, so people understand the different positions that you both agree upon. And like I said at the intro, just Google Act 22. There's so much information of American, millionaires and billionaires. I'm not going to get into the details. But your position, Javi, is because Puerto Rico is a foreign country, people don't pay federal income taxes no matter where you live there. So this is a bad idea. And Fede's position is it's really caused lack of prosperity in Puerto Rico, so it's a bad idea. Am I right, Javi, to frame it that way on your end? I just want to make sure, and then I want to clarify with Fede.
Yeah, no. So I think yes. The short answer to your question is yes, because Puerto Rico is the only place in the planet that an American can go to and not have to pay income taxes on the money that they make. If an American moves to, you know, France, for example, because they've been in the news here recently, the money that they make, be it in France, in the United States, or somewhere else, it's subject to federal income tax. Puerto Rico is the only place that a person can live, that an American can live, that
Yeah.
the money that they make is not subject to income taxes. And because of that, it creates artificially this huge need for federal transfer
Whoa.
payments to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
For context, about half of Puerto Rico's budget is paid for by the American taxpayer. This is
Okay.
unheard of anywhere in America, that half of the expense of a jurisdiction, of a state, of a territory is paid for by American taxpayers. And in the case of Puerto Rico, money that otherwise is not being contributed to by the people who live in Puerto Rico. This is like a really big deal because in many ways, it exacerbates poverty, it accelerates it, and it makes people be incredibly dependent on the federal government. I think, and Federico might correct me if I'm
I'm waiting
wrong.
for I'm going to give you the last point and turn it over to Fede, but go ahead.
So he may correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think that the number of people that receive some sort of federal transfer payment in Puerto Rico is over 60% of the population.
All right, Fede.
I think it's like 43 to 50, but it's still a lot of money, a lot of people. It's almost half of people who depend on some form of federal assistance in Puerto Rico. And by the way, I'm a liberal Democrat. I believe government should help poor people. The case of Puerto Rico is very unique in the sense that ever since Hurricane Maria and all of these federal transfers has skyrocketed, poverty in Puerto Rico has actually gone up. So I don't think that we should cut off the money. I think we should use it in a much better way to promote self-sufficiency, but that's a separate conversation. Where we agree is that this loophole that's meant to benefit Puerto Ricans, which I favor, by the way, Section 933 of the Internal Revenue Code should be protected so Puerto Ricans don't have to pay federal income taxes. But that was meant to help Puerto Ricans, not for these fly-by-night American so-called investors that are gaming the system. And again,
Okay.
some of them are even laundering money and committing crimes by doing it. And they're required to live there half of the year. They're not even required to create more than 3 jobs. So imagine that. You're getting a free ride. You're basically living a tax-free life. You're a billionaire in a mansion in Dorado, Puerto Rico, which is a beautiful beachside town. And you're not paying a cent to anyone, not Puerto Rico, not the US. And what is the benefit? You're just basically expected to magically, out of the goodness of your heart, contribute to the economy, and that's not fair. I don't know any tax incentive in the world where you're not required to create any job.
So, okay, we broke this down, and again, this is a quick show, and I can't believe we're getting these great points into the show. So to fast forward to the elections, because there is an election happening in Puerto Rico on election day, same day as the United States. Javi, why should Act 22 matter in the context of Puerto Rican politics and also in the context of congressional politics? Like, why should it be an issue that gets people to vote for a candidate that might oppose it?
Look, I think the short answer to your question is that the folks that are benefiting from not paying federal income taxes by living in Puerto Rico are funding federal elections. In many ways, some would argue, to protect Puerto Rico's foreign in a domestic sense status so they don't have to pay taxes. Think of it as the reverse Hawaii problem, where Hawaii became a state because a lot of economic interest were moving into Hawaii and wanted, the agricultural interests of the time wanted the American protection and wanted the military to protect Hawaii's interests, right? And their interest in Hawaii. And that's why Hawaii became a state. The colonial status of Puerto Rico in many ways is being protected by the people who are voting or contributing to members of Congress who are living in Puerto Rico, not paying federal taxes. They're saying, look, don't change anything in Puerto Rico. Don't change the status, because the status, Puerto Rico's political status, is what allows us to continue to not pay taxes in Puerto Rico,
Got it.
nor in the United States of America. So if you're voting in Pennsylvania, think about that. And if you're voting in Puerto Rico, think about that. Because in both cases, you're on the losing end of the equation, because if you support annexation like I do, and you live in Puerto Rico, there are a whole bunch of economic interests that don't want you to exercise your point of view of annexation, because annexation is not good for them. And if you live in Pennsylvania and you're paying taxes and you're a hardworking guy and you're paying 30, 40% taxes to the federal government, your money's going to Puerto Rico, and rich people are moving to Puerto Rico and not paying taxes either. So you're both on the losing end of that equation.
All right, Fede, you can jump in, because it's the same question I have for you. It's like, how do you break it down in the context of politics from your perspective? There's 2 elections happening. People can actually speak out against this. What are your thoughts?
So here's the farce of all of this. You have a party that's called the New Progressive Party. Puerto Rico doesn't have Democrats or Republicans. They have 5 political parties. The governing party is the New Progressive Party. And I say progressive many times on purpose, because the candidate for governor is a Republican who voted for Trump in the Republican convention.
And they're the statehood party for people that don't know
that is the statehood party that wants Puerto Rico to be the 52nd state. I live in D.C., and actually I have taxation representation, so D.C. will go first. But that loophole, the Act 22 tax loophole, cannot be possible under statehood. So you have all of these new progressive Republicans that are getting funded by all of these developers and rich people to maintain a status that's incompatible with statehood on the one end. And then you go to the presidential election, and Kamala Harris, and I encourage everybody to see Yarimar Bonilla's op-ed in the New York Times about Kamala Harris' visit to Puerto Rico. She had a fundraiser with some of these Act 22 people. And guess what? Donald Trump got Logan Paul and all of these bros, Bitcoin bros that are Republicans that are in Puerto Rico, and they got $50 million from these Bitcoin people for the Trump campaign. So I'm a Democrat. I'm going to vote for Harris. But guess what? Both parties are wrong on this issue, and it's a complication. And again, if you live in Pennsylvania, like Javi said, and your parks aren't being funded, your hospitals are run down, well, there are people that could be paying taxes there that instead are living the high life in Puerto Rico. And let me just clarify, I know some of these Act 22 people. I know some people that are making money in Puerto Rico, lawyers, realtors, and some of them are good people, and they actually create jobs and they donate to charity, but the law does not require them to create more than 3 jobs. And you're basically leaving it up to the goodness of their heart to be good citizens. And that's trickle-down colonialism.
Yeah. All right. So this is great, first of all, the fact that we're having this conversation, and I'm really fascinated by the 2 perspectives that you're bringing to it, because there are 2 arguments to be made to not support Act 22. So, Javi, how then does this all get resolved? What should happen? I know you are a statehood supporter, and I've had conversations with you. You are not someone who is an institutional statehood supporter. You know, when Federico talks about the PNP, the Progressive Party, I'm making the assumption that you're not someone who's like, yay, PNP. But how does this all get resolved?
Yeah, look, I think I'm an American that happens to have been born in Puerto Rico, which is a different perspective that I think that most folks will bring to the table, because I see it through the eyes of the American dream. And this gets solved, in my opinion, by making sure that everybody in Puerto Rico is living the American dream, that is contributing to the American dream, that is doing that in what I call an equal opportunity to have a healthy relationship with the IRS, and making sure that they're contributing to that Congress, right, does the right thing and solves the colonial problem by annexing Puerto Rico fully and providing all of those opportunities to the people of Puerto Rico, and that the people of Puerto Rico understand that annexation is the ultimate achievement of that American dream, and that they have to contribute to that equally. They can't just be Americans one day and something else next day when it's convenient to them. That, we don't get to choose uh, yeah, where we get to pay taxes as an American. So I think that's how it gets resolved. And I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of people in Puerto Rico that agree with that. In the last election, over 50-some% of the people voted for annexation. And I think that number is going to continue to grow. And they want to participate in that American dream. They want to have a smaller government of Puerto Rico. And although today is 70-some% um, of tax, if the federal income tax were applied to Puerto Rico, that also will help make the Puerto Rico government smaller, and it will have to reduce in size to make it work. I think that's how you solve it.
All right. So that's Javi's solution. Fede, your solution. You agree with Javi about Act 22, but what's your solution? Is it an act of Congress?
So I'm a Puerto Rican who happens to have been born a U.S. citizen, and I think that most Puerto Ricans agree with me and not Javier. I think that
but this is very respectful.
Yeah.
Like, we're all friends.
Of course.
I love this. Okay.
And we both agree that it requires an act of Congress to both abolish Act 22 and close the loophole. Javier wants everybody in Puerto Rico to pay federal income taxes. I want everybody to continue to enjoy Section 933 and be exempt. But these fly-by-night American tax evaders, colonial gentrifiers, should be subject to American income taxes so that they don't continue displacing Puerto Ricans and making it more expensive for people to live there, notwithstanding the few exceptions of people that do good things there. And again, it all comes back to Congress, who can close the Tax 22 loophole, who can decolonize Puerto Rico by fell swoop. I believe in self-determination. I think the Puerto Ricans should elect a constitutional assembly democratically and negotiate in a bilateral way with Congress. But it always will, in the end, be solved by an act of Congress to decolonize the island and remove it from the territorial clause, which, as Javier has said, the Supreme Court of the United States has said that Puerto Rico is foreign in a domestic sense, and that Puerto Rico is owned by, but not a part of the United States. That's unsustainable. Puerto Rico is a nation under occupation, and it deserves its self-determination.
So, Javi, really briefly, your thoughts on what Bad Bunny said. Does it have any implication on the election, or is this just, chatter and just pre-election, buzz?
Look, the good news is that the young people in Puerto Rico are getting involved in the political process. And I think that he's a reflection of young people participating in that political process. Let's not forget that he is incredibly wealthy himself, and that he has the benefit of being able to live, as he said in that interview, he can live anywhere he wants to live. I think that for the rest of the kids in Puerto Rico that, we're not able to move past bagging groceries and getting to be famous and billionaires, right? Ultimately, the question then becomes, what is the government that they elect that is going to move their future forward? And to me, that government to be elected is the one that promotes the full annexation of Puerto Rico into the United States of America so they can live the American dream.
I love the way you did that. Fede, your thoughts on Bad Bunny, do you think it has any implications in Election Day in November?
Bad Bunny's a national hero, along with René Calle 13, Ricky Martin, and Anita Nazario and others. And Ile, they led a peaceful revolution to oust an unpopular governor. 1 out of every 3 Puerto Ricans, 1 million people went to the streets to oust the governor, and Bad Bunny helped to lead that. Everything he said in that interview is correct. I don't like that he said death to the corrupt. I don't believe in the death penalty, and I don't believe in political violence. But I do think that he sends a positive message where the young people today don't take those things that literally. and they need to register to vote. 800,000 Puerto Ricans are eligible to vote, and they haven't reactivated their voting status. And they have until September 21st to do that, and he can have an impact in that. I also want to mention really quickly that Anuel AA in Pennsylvania, even though he's a convict supporting another convict that is Trump, he had a message that resonates. He called Puerto Rico a country with a lot of problems, and Democrats sometimes tend to be a little politically correct and don't tend to say those things. And I'd like to see reggaetoneros with Harris, and I encourage that campaign to move very quickly for that.
You get your points in. Listen, Javier Ortiz, thank you so much for being on the Latino Newsletter.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to make sure that we get other Americans to support the full annexation of Puerto Rico into the United States.
And Federico de Jesús, Fede, thank you as well for being on the Latino Newsletter.
Un placer. Tú eres un orgullo puertorriqueño, and this platform is awesome. So congratulations on the Latino Newsletter and its podcast. And Joaquin, thank you for producing.
Okay. I just want to thank Fede and Javi for being on the show. Very respectful conversation. You can see you can have two Puerto Ricans who are politically opposed, but then you get them together on Act 22 and they're buddies and homies. So you see, people do reach across the aisle. Anyway, those were two very interesting perspectives. Take them from what they are, and I hope you continue to follow what's happening in Puerto Rico. The Latino Newsletter is produced and edited by me, Julio Ricardo Varela, and my fellow Boricua, Joaquin Cotler. The mixing and sound design is all done by Joaquin Cotler, and the music is by Cast of Characters via Soundstripe. Now, if you're listening on Spotify, you can donate directly to us right now. There's a link at the bottom of Spotify. But you can also donate to the Latino Newsletter at thelatinonewsletter.org and click on the donate tab. We are a nonprofit. We want to keep this media independent and free, so consider a donation. And if you like what you heard, you can share this podcast. You can rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe. We're on Spotify. We're also on Apple Podcasts. We're on Audible, iHeartRadio. Tweet us at Lat Newsletter on Twitter, and follow us on all other social media platforms at the Latino Newsletter. And we also created a WhatsApp channel this week. Whatever we're going to do with that, I don't know. And if you want to send me an email anytime, this is my email, julio@thelatinonewsletter.org. We're going to be back next week. Have a great week. Peace out, y'all.